never really political. I got involved in politics around the end of 2016, 2017, really after the Trump election. And that's when I realized, our community needed to get more involved, so I decided to get involved. I created an organization called AMAN, which is American Muslim Action Network. And really the focus of the organization was to get Muslims involved in Monmouth County, more involved politically. And we were really successful that first year. And I realized Monmouth County had never had an elected councilman, Muslim councilman. So when the opportunity came up at the end of 2017, I put my name in and I won the nomination in Red Bank. And I ran in the general and I won, and mashallah, I became the first Muslim councilman in the history of the county. So really that's where my involvement comes from. I tried to do community activism, and that kind of translated into elected office.
Awesome. What advice would you, so you make it sound very easy,
It wasn't easy, no, it wasn't easy, no.
What advice would you have for younger Muslim people who also would like a platform?
I think the first thing we really need to realize is first of all, the importance of offices and political positions and things like that. I think our community really struggles with understanding what impact local government has on their day-to-day lives. People understand the president and maybe they know the governor. Beyond that, people really don't realize. So one of the first things I did when I wanted to get involved was try to learn everything. So I reached out to local electeds, local political people, and I really just tried to learn what the system is in New Jersey specifically, and wherever somebody wants to get involved. And I think that was really helpful in translating our action to our success. I think our community, when people want to get involved, they have a lot of energy, but they don't have a lot of know-how. So what ends up happening is they put a lot of effort into things that aren't as productive or efficient. So really, I think the first step, anybody wants to get involved, first step is understanding what the system is, and then how do you operate within the system. So that'd be my first suggestion.
So for people who obviously don't realize that local government has a huge impact on our day-to-day lives, how can you sum up what kind of an impact it does have? What would you say to people who don't know the extent of that?
Sure. So, this goes to a lot of our community's issues. When we deal with, for example, a mosque. When we're talking about getting a permit for the mosque, when we go to the local boards, you have the planning boards and the zoning boards. In New Jersey especially, because New Jersey is a home rule state, a lot of that authority is within the local county. So I think the biggest mistake our community always does is, say we have a project that we want to go forward with, community center. It gets stalled out somehow. So what we do is we call the governor, we try to call the governor, call the assemblyman. They literally have no authority over that. So the local land use boards, the planning board and the zoning board, all of those members are appointed by the mayor and council. So if the mayor and council is, say, Islamophobic or maybe not supportive of your community, they're going to appoint people who reflect those values. So then when you go before a board, you might have an issue. So people don't know their own council members. These people have a huge impact over major projects that go on in the town. So that's one of the biggest examples I can give.
Thank you. Moving forward, what are your future steps that you want to take? In terms of your own progress, and then when you think community-wise as well, what would you want to do?
Honestly, Allah Alam, I don't know what the next steps would be. I do know that I enjoy what I do. I just finished my first year on council, so I'm pretty new to it. I'm learning. I learned pretty quickly, but I'm still in that process of understanding, where I am, what can I affect, what can I affect, what are the other positions affect. So I couldn't give you specific about what my future would hold. I think it's important for Muslims to continue to press to move into higher positions as we go. We have the local boards that are very important. We have the school boards and the council is very important to populate those. And then when we get to that next step of going to assembly and state senate, and then maybe Congress people and senators. Honestly, I couldn't give you a specific. I really couldn't. Allah Alam. At this point, I just try to do what I can for the community, and whatever happens, happens.
So today's conference is centered around refugees and asylum seekers and migrants. In your position as councilman, or just being a councilman and being surrounded by people who are higher ups as well, what do you think could change if more people were in local and county level government for refugees and migrants?
Sure. So I think a lot of people don't understand that there's a lot of interaction between local, mid-level, and higher-level elected officials. So as a councilman, my jurisdiction is only my borough. But at the end of the day, the congressman who serves my district, the assembly person who serves my district, the governor who serves my state, All these people we interact with on a daily basis. And they look to us for support when they're running. So a lot of times when I have a situation where there's a refugee and he's having an issue with his visa, I can pick up the phone and call my congressman and say, hey, this guy's having this issue, can you please get involved? But as one councilman of many, while my phone call will be taken, if it's 1 versus 50 council members calling him, that's a big difference on how he'll act. And 50 councilmen calling other Congress people. So I think while there's no direct impact, there's a lot of indirect, because a lot of the relationships are built that way. And I think as we start populating some of those boards and those councils, the ideals that we represent start getting reflected higher up. And I think that's how we move forward.
Amazing. A lot of the people that I've spoken to today, a lot of the speakers, the common theme seems to be that people want to try and get rid of divisions. So, we bring Muslims up and different religions and different faiths. And what everyone has talked about is just trying to not have the conversation centered around these divisions, but just mainly looking at everything as a whole and just us being human beings. In your position where you are, the only Muslim councilman in Monmouth County, do you find that it's difficult for you to separate yourself from the Muslim, non-Muslim conversation and that divide? Or do you try to be more just overall and to not talk as much about your faith and about your beliefs?
So I have a kind of a specific view on this. So I make a point of making sure people understand that I'm Muslim and understand what my faith represents. But at the same time, I make a point to make sure people don't think of me as just a Muslim elected. I think moving forward, this really has to be our thought process. We, like any other faith in this country, we can hold office and serve non-Muslim members. So in Red Bank, there might be 5 Muslims total. It's 70% white population. There's no Muslims in Red Bank. And I made a point when I was running that people don't think that I'm only running for Muslim issues, the issues that impact our community. I'm running to be a council member for American citizens. So I do try to make the distinction of I am an elected just like anybody else. I'm not particular on this issue or that issue. I try to represent all issues. But at the end of the day, I want people to understand that it's a Muslim who's doing this. And so when people, I go to a lot of political events, there's alcohol all over the place. A lot of the time they're serving pork. I make sure they understand that when I'm there, they need to have an alternative for me. They know that I don't drink alcohol. When I host fundraisers, I think I mentioned before, when I host a fundraiser, in the beginning I had a lot of comments saying, well, how come you don't have an open bar for us? Well, I explained to them, as a Muslim, I can't pay for alcohol. And people are starting to understand that. So I think my whole thing is trying to normalize Islam to non-Muslims in America. I think that's going to be a long process, but people really need to realize that a Muslim, like a Christian, like a Jewish person, like an atheist, like any other religion, can serve as an elected official and serve his citizens.
Right. We talked about this a little bit before, but just you having the title of a councilman now, does that make you want to be more involved in the Muslim communities and the mosques and want to be, a source of help for them in terms of...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really the reason I did it. I really wanted to just be able to help residents all over. But, of course, my community I really care about. To give you an example, when the New Zealand shooting happened, there was that shooting at the mosque in New Zealand. So while I'm a councilman at Red Bank, the mosque, one of the biggest mosques in Monmouth County, is in Middletown, which is the town over. And my concern after that was making sure that they were safe in the aftermath, because you never know, copycats, that kind of thing. So as a councilman, I was able to call my chief of police, and I had him reach out to the chief of police in Middletown to provide police escorts and security for the mosque in my town. Just because of my status, I was able to call them and say, look, this community is vulnerable, they're going to need help in the next couple of days, they need some sort of security, can you please provide that? And as a courtesy, to my position, they were able to get that done. So I'm glad that, while I'm a councilman in one borough, I was able to use that to affect another town, and use that to affect the communities in the surrounding area, and that's really what I think our focus should be moving forward.
Thank you.